History does not always announce itself with banners or crowds or cameras. Sometimes it slips quietly into the background of ordinary days, revealing its importance only years later. And one such moment unfolded on a warm afternoon in the summer of 1972 inside a low-roofed, iron-scented building in Venice Beach, California, a place already legendary even then. Gold's Gym, the unofficial proving ground of the strongest men alive, where steel plates rang like church bells, and the air itself felt heavy with ambition, sweat, chalk, and testosterone, where men did not come to socialize or pose, but to push flesh and bone beyond reasonable limits, where names like Arnold Schwarzenegger, Ferrigno, and Franco Columbu were not merely athletes, but living monuments to size and strength, men who had reshaped the human form through discipline bordering on obsession, each rep a declaration of dominance over biology itself. This was not a space for finesse or subtlety. It was a cathedral of mass. And yet, in one corner, slightly apart from the towering frames and bulging silhouettes, stood a figure who seemed almost misplaced, a man whose presence contradicted the visual language of the room entirely, lean where others were enormous, compact where others were sprawling, moving not with brute exertion, but with precision and rhythm. Bruce Lee, 5'7", roughly 135 pounds, already the most recognizable martial artist on the planet, briefly back in California while filming Enter the Dragon, using the gym not to build size, but to maintain sharpness, striking a speed bag with metronomic accuracy, each impact landing exactly where intended, hands blurring into motion as the bag answered with a rapid, hypnotic cadence that cut cleanly through the clang of weights, a reminder that speed and control create their own kind of power. Bruce did not look around, did not perform, did not seek attention, because discipline for him was not situational, it was constant. And while the gym pulsed around him, the front doors opened and sunlight spilled across the floor, framing a silhouette so large it seemed to bend perspective itself. A man who entered not quietly, but with gravitational authority. 6'7", over 300 pounds, shoulders stretching a tight tank top to its limit, long blonde hair and a handlebar mustache announcing confidence before a word was spoken. Terry Bollea, only 21, already dominating the world of professional wrestling, already convinced of his trajectory towards superstardom, walking with the certainty of someone who had never been physically overmatched, whose understanding of combat was simple and absolute. Bigger, stronger, heavier meant better, meant unbeatable. As he moved through the gym, men stepped aside instinctively, not in fear, but recognition, because even among giants he was exceptional, and he knew it. Loading a bench press with casual excess, driving the weight upward again and again as eyes tracked the movement, approval registering, but admiration muted. Gold's Gym demanded more than raw power. But when his gaze drifted across the room and settled on the smaller man striking the speed bag without pause, something shifted. curiosity edged with disbelief, the unspoken question forming naturally in a mind accustomed to dominance. How could someone that small belong here at all? The remark, when it came, was loud and careless, designed not only to be heard, but to be acknowledged, a challenge wrapped in humor and confidence as Terry called out to the smaller figure, commenting on the speed, the novelty of fast hands attached to such a slight frame. But Bruce did not stop, did not turn, did not grant the attention that Terry was accustomed to receiving, and that, more than anything, drew him closer, forcing the interaction, inserting his massive presence into Bruce's field of vision until the rhythm finally paused and two radically different physical realities faced one another at close range, the size contrast almost theatrical. Bruce calm and grounded, Terry looming and amused, introducing himself with the expectation of recognition, of deference, extending a hand that engulfed Bruce's entirely, tightening his grip just enough to test, to assert, only to feel unexpected resistance, not competition, not strain, but equality. The pressure returned without effort, without emotion, and something subtle but important registered in Terry's mind even as he laughed it off, pivoting quickly into theory and bravado, explaining to Bruce and to the unseen audience forming behind them that real fighting obeyed physics, that mass and strength were decisive, that speed without size was decoration, not dominance. And as the gym grew quieter, weights slowing, conversations pausing, the age-old debate sharpened into focus, skill versus size, refinement versus raw force. And Bruce, unoffended, unprovoked, simply asked if Terry wanted to test the idea, not a fight, not a contest, but an experiment. An invitation that appealed directly to Terry's confidence, because he believed the outcome was already decided, because the stage was perfect, because 30 witnesses meant validation. And as the circle formed and space cleared, Terry rolled his shoulders with relaxed assurance, while Bruce stood neutrally, hands low, posture unremarkable, offering no theatrical stance, no warning, only permission. And when Terry reached out to grab him, the failure was immediate and confusing, fingers closing on air as Bruce shifted just enough to deny contact, the movement so small it barely registered visually, prompting another attempt, then another. Frustration creeping in as Terry lunged harder, committing more mass, more intent, only to find his own momentum betraying him, balance compromised by subtle redirection, wrists guided rather than seized, strength poured into empty space, until impatience replaced playfulness and Terry charged fully, arms spreading for a crushing embrace meant to end the demonstration in seconds, but Bruce dropped his center, slipped beneath the closing frame, and delivered a single controlled palm strike to the solar plexus, not with force, not with aggression, but with surgical accuracy. And instantly the dynamic collapsed, breath leaving Terry's lungs as if pulled by a vacuum, diaphragm locking, panic flashing through his eyes as his body failed to respond, strength rendered irrelevant by biology. 5 seconds stretching into eternity as he gasped uselessly, hands clutching instinctively, while Bruce stepped back, composed, allowing the lesson to unfold without escalation. And when breath finally returned and Terry dropped to one knee, the silence in the gym was absolute.
broken only by slow inhalations and the unmistakable understanding that something foundational had just been dismantled, because no blow had been thrown, no dominance asserted, yet the biggest man in the room had been rendered helpless by knowledge applied to the correct point at the correct moment.
When Terry finally stood again, the certainty that had carried him through the doors of Gold's Gym was gone, replaced by something quieter and far more powerful: awareness. And as Bruce explained calmly what had happened, describing the diaphragm spasm, the vulnerability of structure over muscle, the difference between strength possessed and strength applied, the men watching understood that they had not witnessed a trick or a parlor stunt, but a fundamental truth about combat and control: that power without precision is waste, that size without understanding becomes liability. And as Bruce articulated how angles defeat force, how balance governs dominance, how commitment creates openings for those trained to recognize them, Terry listened not as a challenger but as a student, asking not how he had lost but how he could learn. And when Bruce offered training conditioned on humility rather than talent, Terry accepted without hesitation, arriving the next morning at dawn to begin a process that would reshape not his body but his perception, absorbing lessons that reframed wrestling and martial arts as distinct languages governed by shared principles, returning to his profession months later more efficient, more controlled, more aware. And years afterward, when fame followed and arenas filled, and his name became synonymous with spectacle, he would still reference that afternoon, not as a defeat but as an awakening, explaining that the smallest man he had ever underestimated taught him the largest lesson of his life, while those who had watched that day carried the memory as well, Arnold himself acknowledging that mass alone could not define power. And as Bruce returned to the speed bag, rhythm restored, the gym resumed its noise and motion, yet something intangible had shifted, because the strongest men in the world had seen strength neutralized without violence, ego dissolved without humiliation, a master demonstrating truth without needing to claim victory. And that is why the story endured, passed quietly through bodybuilding and wrestling circles, not as myth but as a reminder that understanding surpasses intimidation, that control outlasts force, that true mastery reveals itself not in domination but in restraint, and that on an ordinary afternoon in 1974, in a gym already famous for producing giants, the most enduring display of power came from the smallest man in the room, who needed only 9 seconds to show that knowledge, applied precisely, outweighs muscle every time.